Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton, Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's episode. Greg, how you doing?
I am doing quite well. What a great weekend. First of all, weather-wise and holiday-wise, and actually got to gather up with a couple of our daughters.
Outstanding. It was
Yeah.
it was gorgeous here in the Metro Atlanta area, which was a good thing after some of the storms we've had in the last 10 days or so. But we've got a big show here today, Greg. It is
Yeah.
the Supply Chain Buzz, which we hold every Monday at 12 noon Eastern time as we cover some of the biggest stories you want to keep your finger on the pulse of across global supply chain, global business, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is where we start the week with what you need to know about supply chain.
So listen up, as Greg usually
Yes, that's
says.
right. I can't believe I forgot that.
So, hey, we're going to say hello to a bunch of folks here momentarily, but we should add that today's buzz is powered by our friends over at Open Text, the information company. So, Greg, as we have a lot of fun with, they're perhaps the biggest company that no one's ever heard of, right?
Well, that's the first discussion we had with Mark Morley, right, at OpenText, who people probably recall talking about data integrations and that sort of things. But yeah, this company grew from being an EDI, electronic data interchange, for those of you who need that explanation, which is kind of an old technology, but is still prominently in play. But they were an EDI VAR. They connected companies that way, and they have continued to acquire more and more ways of integrating data between companies, within companies, and now starting to provide some additional technologies for them. This is a proud moment for us because our very first sponsor, and we're thankful for that because that helps us continue to bring you this kind of quality content. So thanks to Mark and his team at OpenText for helping power this buzz.
That's right. And we're going to drop Mark's episode, which got a lot of buzz, speaking of buzz, in the comments, and folks can check that out. So let's, and that's just some of the news. Our even bigger news is we've got a home run guest joining us about 12:25, a repeat guest at that.
Yeah.
That's Elliott Paige with one of the world's most important and busiest airports, and that's Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. And Greg, in the pre-show warm-up, I've already got my first page of notes in speaking with Elliott. How about that?
So only 16 to go.
That's right.
That's good. I bet we're going to get it. You're going to fill them up today.
That's right. We're going to fill them up. He's one of our favorite guests, and of course, one of our favorite aspects of global supply chain infrastructure, for that matter. So let's get down to work. We're going to say hello to a few folks really quick, but first off, I want to share a couple of comments here. So on the main channel, quick programming note, don't miss this replay. This was a replay of a live stream we had with Logan from Alloy and Caitlin from Valvoline, and they describe really a very forward-looking business relationship between the two entities. And who's winning, Greg? Everybody wins.
Right.
Certainly Valvoline, their customers, and of course, Alloy is a big part of connecting the whole ecosystem there. Great conversation, right?
It is. It's a really great example of a partnership. You know, I worked with Valvoline when I was in industry. I was in charge of purchasing the product for a major retail automotive chain, and they've always been kind of in the forefront of supply chain, and they have transformed that now into, well, digital transformation and supply chain transformation. And the story around this partnership it's really a great kind of framework for companies to work from and build from.
Agreed. Next generation stuff. So check that out on the main channel. On This Week in Business History, which you can find wherever you get your podcasts, we've published a special episode. Instead of covering a couple of historical dates, we interviewed truly an entertainment industry pioneer. You're not going to miss this interview with Ellen Snortland. Ellen's incredible. One of her latest projects that she spoke about was this documentary she produced, Beauty Bites Beast. And you can learn that at beautybitesbeast.com. But in a nutshell, she really talks about how she spends time as a self-defense instructor, really focused on females, because as she points out, and there's a great story behind it, you know, all self-defense classes are not built from the female perspective, and there's some different dynamics that are really important not to be lost in terms of how females can protect themselves. So this is just one sliver of an incredible journey, a very intriguing interview. Y'all check it out wherever you get your podcast from at This Week in Business History. And finally, Greg, our great friend, Kelly Barner, and her partner, Philip Addison with Art of Procurement, Buyer's Meeting Point. They've got a great event coming up on the 13th and 14th of April. And guess what, Greg?
What?
It's free. It's completely free.
Free.
How about that?
Free.
So all about the hot space of procurement leadership, and how you can ensure that your procurement leadership team is positioning the organization for successful growth. So check this out. We're really proud to serve as a sponsor for this event, this series of events, this Mastermind Live. This is the spring version, and it's got a ton of great feedback from the market. So Greg, looking forward to that event, right?
Yeah, undoubtedly. I got to tell you, I had an experience over the last week and even this weekend, Scott, talking to Kelly. She's kind of helping me evaluate some companies for investment, and the insights that she can provide, not just into into what the users, the buyers need or companies need, but also what a company needs to look like and the value of what they might call their differentiating technologies and things like that. It is incredible. I mean, you are truly learning from a mastermind when you talk to or listen to Phil or Kelly. So
love that ringing endorsement, genuine ringing endorsement.
Yeah, I've experienced it firsthand.
And again, we're big fans of all these wonderful people and business leaders that invest so much into these events and then make it free to attend. I mean, really, especially during this time frame. So y'all check that out. I think we've already dropped the link in the comments, and we hope to see you there. Okay, so Greg, I'm excited about a lot of things, and we're going to tackle some great stories that folks are going to enjoy. I think we've got a home run guest in Elliott Paige with the airport. And I think the only thing that's missing is we got to say hello to some of the folks that have showed up today.
Have showed up.
Right. So let's see here. And I should note also that Elliott's colleague, Linda Eshiwani-Nate, is she's lurking in the comments.
Yes.
They keep.
Yeah. Welcome back, Linda.
So we look forward to showcasing her perspective here. So Srinivas is with us again from India via LinkedIn. Tarun is with us via LinkedIn as well. Great to see you. Kavan is back. Talk about your masterminds. Kavan is back with us here today. Javan is with us via LinkedIn. Umar from Juba, South Sudan. Outstanding.
Wow.
Great to have you here. Azalea.
It's late where he is.
Yes, it is. Commitment to the
craft.
I
appreciate that for sure. Yeah.
Azalea says, rubbing hands together with a grin on her face. Azalea, great to have you here as always. Ramandeep, hello via LinkedIn. Great to have you here. Good morning. Warren is live with us via LinkedIn from Cleveland, Ohio.
All right.
Cleveland.
Cleveland.
Home of the resurgent Browns. Greg, they couldn't.
Yes. I got to tell, Paul Noble, the CEO at Verison, big Browns fan. And of course, the Chiefs and the Browns have the Marty Schottenheimer connection, and also being the doormat of the league for a lot of decades. So there is a certain affinity between Browns and Chiefs fans until we play them. Love you in Cleveland.
Warren, we're wishing you all the best. The Bernie Kosars and Ernest Beiners of the team.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, and hey,
Michael D. Perry.
Do they have the best personality in the league? I mean, Baker Mayfield, he has made that stadium like his home.
Right.
Whatever those commercials say. And what a great personality that young person has.
Agreed. All right. So Warren, great to have you here. Latori is tuned in from Germany via LinkedIn. Great to have you here. Tom Raftery is with us. So hope this finds you well, Tom, you and your podcasts.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Rhonda Pampinza Zimmerman, which we couldn't do a live stream without, is with us. Gary Smith is with us. Peter Bolay. I'm sorry, I'm going fast here. AA. Hello from Wichita.
There he is.
What a sunny, windy, and beautiful weather for new birds to enjoy their first flight at the air capital. Love that. Okay. So
I'm glad to see Sunny because I'm going to be there pretty soon. And actually, AA has invited me to do a guest lecture with their IME 777 class graduate students about supply chain. So that'll be interesting. Well, it'll be interesting for me. I'll let the students be the judge of whether it's interesting to them.
Well, hello to everyone else. So glad you're here with us here today. We've got some interesting stuff to tackle here. So with no further ado, Greg, are we ready to do it?
Let's get to work. This. Yeah.
All right. So first story here. Unfortunately, we're talking about forced labor, which has been a common theme here lately. So in this story that comes to us from Eshiwani-Nate with Supply Chain Dive, the U.S. government has elected to seize shipments of gloves produced by Top Glove. The reason? The U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency points to evidence of forced labor in the Malaysian-based manufacturer supply chain. The CBP has also taken action on other products recently, as concerns continue to mount over forced labor. In January, the agency declared that all cotton and tomatoes from China, from the Uyghur. I get that wrong all the time. So all cotton and tomatoes from the Uyghur Autonomous Region are going to be continue to be seized. So here's an interesting tidbit, though, Greg. I didn't know this until Shafali educated me. Mm-hmm. Unlike our justice system in the U.S., where you got to be proven guilty. In trade, you've got to prove your innocence.
Yeah.
So as the article points out, procurement and supply chain leaders, once their shipments have been detained, they've got to prove that forced labor was not used, which of course is just one more reason why we're all after vital supply chain visibility and traceability here in the information age. One more note, disposable gloves, of course, are in high demand. As we all know, the CBP says this enforcement against Top Glove is not going to be a big hit in overall supply, which is interesting. So, Greg, a couple of your comments here.
Well, so I worked with a company that I shall not name because I can't verify their culpability in this, but we were sourcing a lot of gloves in the early 2000s from China, and recognizing that there was a limitation, started sourcing from Malaysia. And Top Glove was one of the brands that we worked with. I prefer to use the more natural term slavery than forced labor, because that's precisely what it is. And frankly, the CBP, they warned them. They a couple months ago, we reported that the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol would assume that any goods coming out of Xinjiang province, which is the Uyghur Autonomous Region, Xinjiang province, they would assume that anything that came out of that was built using slavery, and that it would be subject to seizure. So that a company continued to source goods there. They rolled the dice and it came up snake eyes. So, I think they had plenty of notification to figure out another way to source those goods, or to verify that they were in fact not slave built. And maybe they are not. It's very possible that they are not. Unlikely, but possible. So all they got to do is prove it. And they had adequate warning to be able to either shift their sourcing or to prove that the goods are not. So we'll see as this comes through the process.
Agreed. And, I think one of my favorite parts about this story is hopefully it catches the attention of all supply chain leadership globally, especially with products, and folks will be doubling down to ensure that up and down the supply chain, they're not using slavery to bring their products to market. So you hate to make an example out of anybody, but to your point, they were warned, and we'll see. But the jury's out. We'll see what comes out of this. So it's important to track, though, because that thankfully the use of forced labor and slavery is getting a lot more visibility, and hopefully is going to be eliminated in the months to come.
Well, okay, it won't be months, unfortunately, because there are way too many people, and it would take a massive shift. And the existence of slaves will likely not change in China, because we can't change their policy. We can just at least take away the business that motivates this slavery, and by that, hopefully, China starts to reform. But this is a egregious impact on this Muslim minority in China. So
I'm with you. Hey, I'm optimistic. We all want to end it as soon as possible. So we'll keep tracking this story, but great reporting as always by the Supply Chain Dive. Hopefully that's on your list of resources. Okay, let's move to number 2 on a lighter note here. So talking chips and big investments. So according to a report in Industry Week, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, also known as TSMC, announced a major expansion last week. $100 billion is what the company has announced that they're going to be investing to expand capacity. No specs yet. There's no details on where these funds will be used. But this comes on the heels, Greg, of U.S.-based Intel announcing that it would be spending $20 billion on 2 semiconductor factories in Arizona. TSMC has said that the automotive industry was a top priority, but they've said that all plants are already running at full capacity despite all the overtures from industry to find ways. Here's an interesting point, though. Making semiconductors requires a ton of water. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And Murphy's Law, of course, is alive and well. As further compounding the issue, in 2020, no typhoons hit the island country for the first time in 56 years.
Wow.
So that has triggered drought concerns for the weeks and months ahead. So as if, all this perfect storm that's come together, it wasn't big enough. I had no idea about that little typhoon factoid. So here's a related note. If you were looking at the news on your Easter Sunday, you will saw, maybe especially if you're here in the Southeast, you'll see that the Kia plant in West Point, Georgia, which makes over 3 million vehicles each year, 3 million vehicles each year. Well, it's being shut down for 2 days this week, primarily due to a lack of semiconductors. And that's not the first time. Of course, we've talked here earlier about all the different automotive companies that have had to halt or slow production due to the shortages. One last point. It all goes back to trade, it seems. The Korea Times quoted TSMC chairman Mark Liu as saying that the future course of chip shortages, quote, really depends on future U.S.-China negotiations, end quote. So, Greg, how would you like to own a semiconductor plant right now?
Well, it's interesting about that, isn't it? We call the valley around Palo Alto Silicon Valley because that's how they got their start, was making semiconductors and computers and whatnot there. Now they've moved to cloud and software technology. But, we used to, like many things, we used to have our destiny in our own hands, and we no longer do. And this is kind of the upshot of it. Truth is, with the cost of doing it, at the time with labor costs and whatnot in the States, there was no way it was sustainable anyway. But this is another one of those extreme supply chain disruption examples, isn't it?
No, absolutely.
I wonder what he means, future U.S.-China negotiations. Did he go into any depth about what aspect of negotiations, or?
He may have. I stole that at the last minute as a nice little
it's
addendum.
okay. I'm curious because we're largely dependent, but not solely dependent on China necessarily for the semiconductors, but for the precious metals and some of the rare earth elements that go into those things. The world is largely dependent on China. So maybe that has something to do with it.
Agreed.
Because the TSMC is in Taiwan, also, not a friend or fan of China. So that they have probably experienced some opportunities, let's say, for alternate sourcing.
Yeah, agreed. A ton of geopolitical dynamics to this massive global industry story. So, it's been fascinating to see, and it's been fascinating as well as all the different factors that are playing a part here. Of course, Tom points out climate change with the typhoons, and we've got some other folks making other comments, but it's just that perfect storm in this ever-changing information age we live in, where everything has a computer chip. It's amazing times that we live in here. And Sylvia says, the tip of the supply chain iceberg is not even visible yet. Time to get out of the ballroom into the boiler room. I love that. Good stuff here. Okay, so Greg, let's keep driving before we bring in our featured guests here today that we're all excited about. This was a neat story. Now, look, we all know that this competition is nothing new. It's been around for a couple of decades. Greg could probably lay it out better than most. But this was pretty cool. In the New York Times, Google wants to be the anti-Amazon of e-commerce. The company has been revising its approach with hopes of more effectively competing with Amazon. So here's a quick summary. And y'all, this is a deep article in the New York Times. So check it out on your own. But what I gathered here is their aim is to, with Google's anti-Amazon strategy, their aim is to market themselves as cheaper and less restrictive to the independent sellers. It's focused on driving traffic not to Google, but to their seller sites. No emphasis on selling their own Google products, which we've talked a lot about when it comes to Amazon and their approach, and building on its partnership with Shopify to offer more value to the sellers, such as optimizing search results and ad effectiveness. So, but here's a big gap, and the journey is hard. From a bottom line perspective, $295 billion in revenue was generated by Amazon's third-party marketplace in 2020. And according to Marketplace Pulse, which the article references, they estimated that about $1 billion in goods were purchased on Google. Google, we're coining new websites here.
Yeah.
Google. So it's Monday. It is definitely Monday. So to help on executing on this new strategy, late last year, Google brought in Bill Reddy, a former chief operating officer at PayPal. So Greg, I got to ask you, and again, there's a lot more in depth in the article. Y'all check it out. But Greg, when you go to purchase something new, do you take a minute and Google to search for it, or do you go straight to Amazon like a lot of folks do?
I do Google, but guess who comes up in the top listings in Google, right? This is a really interesting perspective and a really interesting initiative because Google had their chance. I don't know if anyone remembers this. They had a site called Frugal, and I did all of my shopping at Frugal, specifically Froogle, which was pretty cool. I did all of my shopping specifically at Frugal because I could get right to the sellers that way. But I mean, it's interesting because I work again with a lot of these technology companies. One of the I think we all know the veil has been pulled off on Amazon. We know they're competing. We know they're ripping off their marketplace participants, their vendors' products, and white labeling them, at least in some cases. And they may or may not be punished for that by the U.S. government. But the other thing that is really egregious that I did not know. Did you know that technically on Amazon, the customer is not yours? It's Amazon. You don't get enough data to market to that client. For instance, you get the order, but if you're using FBA, you don't even get the shipping address for that client. So you can't go market directly to them. And that alone should make people start moving towards Google and Shopify and other marketplaces. The difficulty is that it's still a collection of applications and solutions that's being put together to combat the FBA offering. So many, and people are coming to e-commerce. They're creating e-commerce brands in droves, and they really just want to be the brand and outsource everything, which is a trend, Scott, you and I talked about some years ago that would be best for retail, frankly. Yeah. Is just to outsource everything and be the brand, be the marketing brand for the shop and select the brands that you want to represent your storefront in the marketplace. So those are all good trends, but it does create a sort of, we would like a one-stop shop. Yeah. If anyone can accomplish that, it's Google. And I think that there is a way to do it, and certainly they are big enough to compete with and motivated to compete with Amazon. So Excellent. We'll see. Yeah, but they're going to have to make a bigger commitment to e-commerce than they have made in the past. I mean, their commitment to e-commerce in the past was kind of like their commitment to Google Plus, if anyone even remembers that. Let's try that, and when it doesn't work in 2 weeks, we'll abandon it. So hopefully they have a longer term commitment than that.
Excellent commentary. And it's tricky, as you point out early. I mean, Amazon spends a ton on Google ads, a ton, and they pointed out in the article. So it's going to be an interesting two-step dance as they try to optimize and be more successful at their co-opetition, which is what it is. Okay, I'll share a couple quick comments before we bring on Elliott. Let's see here. Warren says he believes Google will hold out longer because someone is aiming to top Amazon today as we speak. As Leah says, is this really the best direction for Google, though? It just seems the current infrastructure just isn't designed for this purpose. Sometimes focusing on competition steers us from innovation to tackle the untouched issues instead of topping out the competitor. Interesting commentary there from Azalea. And Tom says, true, Greg, Google are even more ADD than I am. So, and Shernevis,
it is true, and we've seen it over the years. I mean, you forget about some of these initiatives, right? But we have seen that over the years. But if they're smelling $295 billion worth of revenue, which is still a rounding error even for Google, if they're smelling that kind of revenue, then I think they'll make a pretty good commitment to it.
There's as you say, there's some pretty smart people over at Google and Amazon.
I've heard that. I have heard that. Yes.
It'll be interesting to keep our finger on the pulse. Okay, so much to talk about here today. But Greg, we're excited about this repeat guest that we're bringing into the stream here momentarily. We and really have enjoyed our previous discussions, and we'll see if the team can't drop maybe his last appearance with us. But Elliott Paige, Director, Air Service Development with Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International Airport. Good afternoon, Elliott. How you doing?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome aboard.
Hi, Greg. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Last time we met, it was actually in person, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were in the studio.
Yes, I remember it well. Yeah, fondly.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, as Elliott was sharing with us pre-show, he's starting to get back out and travel a little bit. So getting back together in our new studio is going to be a priority. So Elliott, we look forward to that. But hey, in the meantime, the world doesn't stop for anything, and certainly freight and air cargo doesn't stop for anything. Really quick, for starters here, can you give us a quick update on the air cargo market? I know there's a wide variety of trends and challenges, but what's a couple things that folks may need to know about that market?
E-commerce is taking over, with everyone being at home, ordering online, being a little cautious about being in a brick and mortar store. E-commerce has taken off, and the kind of growth that we expected to see over maybe 5 years has happened in a couple of months during 2020.
Right.
So it's amazing, but I look in my neighborhood and almost every hour of the day I see an Amazon van or a FedEx van or UPS or just one of each, and they're bumping into each other. It's crazy, and it's no less busy for the airport when it comes to that. We've had Amazon, which has multiplied the number of flights, and we've had to find solutions. So it's been a challenge.
I bet. And the last time, Greg, that we had Elliott with us, we were talking about some major improvements that was going to help the airport better compete, right?
Yeah. The kind of transfer and delivery. I forget the name of it, Elliott. What do you call
Cargo community system? We call it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that and kind of how that's been impacted and anything else that's new at ATL?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of things that's new.
I bet.
In the sense that, so we have, I think the last time we spoke about Building C, which is one of our buildings that we built ourselves, about 140,000 square feet. Half of that building is taken up by DHL in their own efforts to expand and make Atlanta more of a hub for them. They have some great plans to build out some material handling system in that building. So I'm excited to see that. I'm a bit of a warehouse nerd when it comes to things like logistics nerd. So I get excited about material handling.
That's why we welcome you back, Elliott.
I get excited about warehouses and dock doors and material handling systems. Not very sexy things for many other people.
Yeah.
And World Flight Services is also taking up the other half of that building. They also think they have a general manager already in town, and she is going around trying to hire staff. So folks who are looking for jobs, come to the airport. We have a lot in cargo going on. We need a lot of people, bodies to move a lot of the cargo that we're getting, because it's not just e-commerce is growing, just regular cargo is growing tremendously. Right. I'll give you a quick statistic. We typically have, just looking at trucks alone, we typically have about maybe 900 trucks, 9,000 trucks per month. In March this year, we've had about 12,000 trucks and vans coming through, picking up and delivering cargo. Wow. And in terms of parked aircrafts, we typically have around 600 aircrafts we're parking per month. Now we're close to 1,000 aircrafts. And it's a challenge because you run out of parking space after a while, and you then have to get creative, start limiting people on the amount of time you spend on the ground so that we can maximize the use of the space. But we need more people. Hiring people is one of our challenges, because with COVID, people don't want to come out to work as much. Ironically, the stimulus package is great in that it stimulates demand so you see a lot more ships coming into the ports on the West Coast, but then there are delays because demand is too high. Right. And what happens on our side in the airports, because people now have more money to spend, they don't want to work on the airport. Right.
So, they're basically getting paid not to work.
So we get this double whammy, because you have an increase in demand and an increased purchase of stuff, but then we need the people to work to deliver those stuff to them, and some people don't want to work. So, it works out eventually, in the sense that once the stimulus money starts running out, people then come back to work. But we, it's all a good problem to have.
Right. So let me go back for a second. We've got a question here, and I'm not sure how much else you can share about the growth, but Anissa asked, can all of the growth be explained by the growth in e-commerce? You mentioned there's probably a couple other factors. Yeah. Elliott.
E-commerce is one. Amazon went from 1 flight a day to today 4 flights a day. So e-commerce is clearly one of the main factors. But just regular cargo, we were surprised that last year our cargo volume fell by 6%. And when you looked at passenger volume falling by 61%, you see the difference. We didn't do too bad. And some of that shortfall, that 6% shortfall, was not because of demand, but because we didn't have enough capacity. We didn't have enough aircrafts to actually move cargo. Right. Because, at pre-COVID, maybe 50% of our cargo was moving on the belly of passenger airlines.
Right.
And when all of those were grounded, we had this period where cargo fell tremendously, not because of demand, but because there's no one to move it. There's not enough aircrafts to move it. So now a lot of the passenger airlines, they're getting rid of their older aircrafts, and the cargo industry is gobbling them up. They're purchasing them and they're converting them into freighters. All your old 767s and your 787s. And now those are now slowly coming on stream and becoming all freighters, and are moving some of that excess demand, that pent up demand for cargo.
So really quick, thanks so much, Nora, great question. And Peter and Tom, thanks so much for stepping in and shedding some light on e-commerce. We all have different vocabularies when it comes, and we all know different things. So really, I love the conversations that take place in the comments. Peter also shed some light here. He feels that impacted container freight has added volumes to ship products over air versus the sea. Of course, we've heard recently Peloton.
Yeah, right? That's exactly what I was going to ask, Elliott, is how many flights a day are full of Pelotons?
I'm sure a lot. With the West Coast issues, delays and so forth, some of those that cargo is flying by air. And it happens for Peloton, but more importantly, it's happening for the manufacturing sector. You mentioned earlier, I heard your segment about Kia plant closing for 2 days. And for a plant to close, it's, as you know, in the supply chain industry, that's a lot of money to close for any amount of time. So, but when you have a segment of your production line staff getting getting COVID, and then they have to close that group down, they have to find a way to fill that gap. And sometimes the way they do is just import the part or that component from another factory. And the best way to do that is by air. So what's happening with us at the airport is that, we get a notice that a flight's coming in, a chartered flight is coming in with some emergency supplies for manufacturing, and it's in the air, and it's halfway across the Atlantic, and it wants to land in Atlanta because it's an emergency. And for us, it's like, no, we need more time. We need more time to know when you're landing so that we can find parking space, so that we can coordinate our resources on the ground. So I'm spending a lot of time talking to executives of these airlines to say, well, I understand that you get a short notice, but we need as much time as possible just to be able to plan our resources so that we can handle these incoming flights.
So, going back to the big initiative that we tackled in your previous appearances, that the air cargo community, in hindsight, how fortuitous that y'all tackled that prior to this age we live in. I mean, do you think you're better prepared to handle the current situation because of that investment?
We're not doing too bad. Getting the Building C infrastructure up was important. Getting cargo community system in place was important. We wish we had done all of these things earlier so that the market would have adjusted to them and appreciate them and use them a lot better. We do have an RFP out right now for what we call a modern air cargo terminal, which is a big project in the southern part of the airport to have what we want is kind of the latest and the best technology to move air cargo. Personally, I wish we had done that 3 years ago so that it's up and running today to handle the volume, but who could have predicted COVID?
Right.
So,
well, I wish I had stood up a semiconductor factory about 3 years ago, Elliott, and retire early on a beach somewhere.
Yeah.
But it really
to Antigua.
Yeah.
There we go.
That's right.
I bet you can get us a good place there.
Oh yeah. Just call me. I'll tell you where to stay.
We'll land with your parents until we find someplace.
Yes. All right. I want to share a couple of comments here, and then Greg would welcome where we're going to go next with Elliott. Let's see here. So Pierre, I hope this finds you well. I love what you're doing down in Noonan. Noonan here in Georgia was hit by storms, and Pierre's out there making it happen, helping others. And there's a lot of folks chipping in. So Pierre, all the best to what you're doing. But he says, no matter the technology or advances in data, people still drive the supply chain and customer experience. Human resource capacity and flexibility becomes a strategic lever. Elliott is nodding his head, as both of y'all are, as well. I read his comments. Well said there. Sylvia points out, despite all the business air cargo, that still 98% of all cargo moves via ocean. Let's see here. Leah's got a question for you. Do you think the personnel infrastructure is great enough to handle the demand now?
That's a good question. The personnel is there. So it's different on an airport because we have security requirements. If you apply for a job to work on the airport, you are investigated by the FBI. You're fingerprinted. Your name and information fingerprint is sent to Washington D.C. and you have to have a clean record and all of that stuff. We want to make sure that that both our cargo folks and anyone working on the airport can pass any security requirement check. So when you add that layer of requirements and bureaucracy to get folks on the airport, it creates more of a challenge. It's not as simple as getting a job in a warehouse off airport.
Right.
So and because the entire industry is growing, because the logistics is not just on airport, it's off airport as well.
Right.
It's the trucking, it's all the warehouses around the airport. We're competing with these others for the labor supply. So when you have that much competition, and you have, because the logistics sector is doing very well right now, but because of that demand, it's a challenge to get and keep people. So it's important that, and I hate to say this, because most of us who have our Amazon Primes and all of that stuff, we love cheap shipping and free shipping and all that stuff, but we have to pay more for shipping. And of course, listening to you, Greg, earlier talk about Amazon and so forth, the Amazons of this world and the Google of this world, they have to pass on that savings, that extra payment to the folks in the industry, rather than hug it for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening now is that the industry, both at the biggest, like the Amazons and the airlines and so forth, they squeeze the guys who are lifting the boxes.
Right.
The truckers, the guys at the warehouses and so forth. So they're getting close to minimum wage. If you're getting close to minimum wage and you need to work in an airport where you must have security checks, it's not encouraging. So we must be prepared to pay more for the efficiency, and that payment must be passed on to the folks who are actually doing that work.
Yeah, agreed.
No such thing as free shipping, right, Greg?
Yeah, that's right. I was thinking that as it's being paid for somewhere, or it will be paid for eventually, right? And you can see, I mean, the prices of things have gone up, and that's not solely because of the fact that we've just manifested $4.5 trillion out of thin air and stuffed it into the economy. It's also because real costs are going up, right? I mean, air shipping is going to get paid for. It's not going to get paid for in this order of Peloton, but the next person who orders it is going to pay ever so slightly more because of that, right? That's just the way that economics works. So,
well, I think, and Greg, I know we want to move forward to some eureka moments here momentarily, but I think a lot of folks, even in supply chain, don't necessarily understand that the extra dynamics, nuances of supply chain at our airports. I mean, the workforce notion, Elliott, I completely didn't even think about that extra layer of security as you're vetting, applicants and whatnot. So, the pandemic has done a great job of showcasing all of our blind spots, hadn't it, Greg?
Yeah. As if supply chain isn't complex enough, now you've got a security gate to get through, right? And federal prison waiting for you on the other side if you do something wrong. So,
So we don't have any of that. We have very good people that are working.
Of course, but I mean, you do have to be vetted very carefully, right, to even get onto the airport grounds. Yeah. So I'm curious about something, and I think that a few folks in the community have shared something. As you make some of these adjustments that you've described, Elliott, how many of those do you think are permanent versus temporary? And are you provisioning for some of these changes? For instance, this incredible influx of air freight. Are you provisioning for some of those things to be temporary rather than permanent? Or do you see things going not back to the way they were, because they won't, just because we can't lose all of the e-commerce growth that we have. Mm-hmm. But a lot of what we're seeing now is because of those emergency situations or supply chain disruptions that won't sustain. So tell us a little bit about whatever you can about what you're anticipating there. It doesn't even have to be what you're doing, but what you might be anticipating there.
Well, if I think of an example, in 2015, the West Coast had longshoremen strike and stevedore strike and so forth, and that led to a lot of delays, which then spilled over into the airport, having this tremendous spike in cargo for a couple of months. Now it did go up, but it didn't go all the way back down to what it was before, because then you had the market kind of adjusted and people got accustomed to shipping things via air, recognizing that in some instances it wasn't as expensive as some of them thought, and it was easier to get things to the market faster. I think e-commerce is going to stay as it is. E-commerce is not going to likely to go backwards. So you're right about that. I think a lot of the other demand is going to continue to grow, maybe not as fast. So we may have, when things normalize a bit, we may have a reduction by, a small percentage, less than 5%, but we will continue to grow. And, the airport, in our master plan, in our the fact that we have an RFP out for a new infrastructure for cargo that we don't even have yet today, all points to this, because we're not just looking at the airport, but we're looking at this region. And this region continues to be a magnet for investment. And it is because there are various types of companies that relate and integrate and depend on each other. So, you have the medical industry, pharmaceutical industry, biotech. You have the automotive industry, as well as the aerospace industry, which are all in this region, and the various ancillary support sectors
Clustering.
is clustering together, and it's attracting even more business.
Yeah.
And because of that, we know investors want direct flights to their headquarters, and they want cargo planes that can move their goods and their parts and their factory stuff. And when you have moments like this where COVID, and you have factories that may need a specific component, you can get it from someplace else by flying it in. If you have the airport as a fantastic infrastructure like that, it creates that growth. It just makes it easy. So we think that we're preparing for the future by building the infrastructure to support the region as it continues to grow. So yeah,
tons of opportunity, Greg.
I'm curious, as I asked you that really tough question. By the way, thank you for that answer. It's really insightful. I mean, and it's not an easy thing to even contemplate, is it? Because we don't know, and we haven't seen. And this is something that I'm encouraging people to think about. We haven't seen all the disruptions to come. I think people are starting to think about the new normal way before it's time. There will be far more disruptions, as Sylvia was talking about, far more disruptions to the supply chain before things get back to normal, because it has this sort of waterfall effect. We adjust this and that adjusts how people interact to buy things. The backups of delivery on this mean they switch to that, and we don't know the impacts of all of those things. So it's a really difficult thing to foresee, but I appreciate you sharing that with us. I'd love to hear if there was kind of a breakthrough moment or eureka moment, an aha moment that you have had in that hopefully has helped you, but even if it just kind of awakened you, that you've had during this seismic societal disruption. Anything just jump out at you as, I never ever thought of that, and kind of hits you?
I mean, maybe a couple. I didn't think we would run out of parking spaces for aircraft.
Well, someone was saying, Elliott, someone was asking about multi-storied aircraft parking, and I was thinking about that.
After he mentioned that,
that may not be in the cards.
Yeah, I mean, we don't like to build things too high, or because it's expensive. Stacking concrete on top of one another in a safe way is expensive. But also, how I think one of the things that struck me though is how important people are, and how important it is to in this industry, I guess in any industry, to really care about people. When folks come to work and thinking that you could get a virus that could make you very ill, or maybe even kill you, or fine, you might be fine, but you could take it home to your family, and then what happens to them, to your loved ones? And to think that you need to work in an environment like that as leaders in this industry, we really have to show that we care for the people who are moving the boxes, who are driving the trucks, who are driving the vans, who are flying the planes, the warehouse managers and so forth. We really have to show that we care about the livelihood of these people, that they're normal human beings with families, with kids. And although they want to make a living, but they also want to live. They want to be able to breathe. And we have to pay attention to that. And I think those of us who are best able to relay that message to the people that work with us, I'm not saying for us, but with us, then we're the ones that are most successful. Those are the ones that are most successful.
Yeah, I think that, it's interesting because I thought I was such an advanced leader when I told people to stay home and if they chose to work from home when they were sick, long before this, right? Because I've watched that, even just the common cold or the flu or whatever, expand through the office, right? And just devastate the health of the office for a period of time.
Yeah.
But this is a whole nother level, right? I mean, this is so contagious that it is a whole nother level, and it awakens you regardless of how you have managed or viewed health care in the workplace going forward. And I think it's going to change things for a good long while in terms of how we consider things like that. So
well said. Hey, I want to go back on a lighter note. Tom says, "Hey, I wasn't too serious with the multi-story plane parking, but Greg, I was thinking about.
I still think it's a great idea.
I was thinking of the Fisher Price parking garage play set. Right, if the plane goes in, you just bring them up to the third floor, and Azalea had the same concept: move over Carvana.
Well, yeah, you know what immediately I thought of was the parking decks in Amsterdam that they have for bicycles, tens of thousands of bicycles in parking decks. And I'm thinking, okay, build it a little bit heavier. The ramp needs to be a little bit more gradual, but possible.
So Kavan really appreciates the point. Clearly that was probably a blind spot in many non-aviation professional minds. So lack of parking space for airports as a result of disruption. Rhonda goes back to the last point, Elliott, you and Greg were talking about 2020 and beyond taught us love and kindness for self and others is key to our collective success and well-being. Well stated.
That's why she is our community, right? She's our community mental health counselor. She keeps us all sane.
That is right. Okay. Well, Elliott, so much good stuff. I feel like we're just scratching the surface, and you could probably, if you had a couple whiteboards, we could all get certified in all things airport leadership management. But tell us, we've gotten some interest in the comments from folks for some of the jobs that you are looking to fill, and for folks that just want to connect with you and learn more about one of the world's most successful and busiest airports. How can folks connect with you, Elliott?
Well, email is fine. And my email is just my name, elliott.page@atl.com. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Elliott Paige is easy to find, or any one of the social media platforms for that matter. And, I always respond. I might not respond right away, but I will respond. Well,
we'll have to bring you back. I enjoyed Elliott, by the way, Greg, and to our folks in community, is an excellent LinkedIn social follow. He published a recent blog on working internationally and some things to think about. So we'll have you back, Elliott, to talk about that, because we get questions all the time about how can folks break into supply chain and then advance. And of course, being able to think globally rather than in just your neck of the woods is an important part of that. So Elliott Paige, always a pleasure with one of the world's true gems, the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. We will see you soon. And by the way, please tell Linda we said hello, and we'll have y'all in the studio with us before you know it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Elliott. Good seeing you.
Thanks so much,
Greg. See you guys.
All righty.
Bye-bye.
Wow. There's so much, just for all the stuff we talked about, there was so much else that we didn't even get to.
Well, there's so much that I wanted to ask him, but I'm almost afraid of the answer. I hope that ATL is still the busiest airport in the world, but all things considered, you just don't know. And I held back because I didn't want him to say no. And if he doesn't say it, then it's not true. That's the way. But
well said.
We can look that up and figure that out. But
yeah, write that down.
Yeah.
Write that down.
Yeah.
A movie quote or something. All right.
Well, I think, what's interesting is so many of the disruptions that we've talked about, and Tom said in the comments, disruption is the new normal. I think what's interesting is that the expose of disruption is the new normal. Those of us who've been in supply chain for decades know that disruption is the normal, right? Just not this measure of disruption. So it's going to give us some disruptions that we've not seen for years to come, literally years to come.
Agreed. And just like we thought, clearly we can see from all the feedback, I don't think folks from our airports and our air cargo communities, they're underrepresented. We'll have to feature their POV more often. I think a lot of folks have these blind spots and have these areas of just that stuff they don't even think about. I know I have plenty, and Elliott can really speak to a lot of that. And, we didn't even talk about the international kind of the diplomacy and trade aspect, which he touched on in earlier interviews with us. That is really interesting as well.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, and as much as I want Elliott and his team to be highly successful, I don't want this sustained uplift in terms of air cargo to remain, because that is it's not sustainable from a cost standpoint for us as consumers. And I think maybe one of the coming changes will be e-commerce at less pace, as people are forced finally to really pay for freight. But I know that volume will remain high because, as Elliott said, e-commerce is not going back to where it was. It may not remain at the level that it is now, but it is not going back to where it was. The 3 to 5 years and 3 to 5 months that he talked about, I would say 4.5 of those 5 months of uplift are here to stay.
Yep. And someone's paying for that freight, undoubtedly. It's funny the things that grab our attention. This airport parking. Pierre says aircraft carriers have had this concept down for the past 75 years.
I don't think we could fit an aircraft carrier at ATL.
Sean says probably the Boeing company, in their efforts to go up 30 levels underground for transportation, can integrate in an airport. It's a good point.
It's possible, right?
Hey, it's all possible, right? According to Kevin Garnett, anything's possible. Asleah Davis says studying HRM, human resource management, and HCM, human capital management, in her MBA program. These ideals must be integrated into the business plan and mission of an organization. The body is only as healthy as the hands and feet. Great point. Srinivas says the guys work very hard at the air terminal, clearing shipments, and of course managing the warehouse, the company management. Nice explanation. Thanks, Scott and Greg. Hey, Srinivas, that's all Elliott. Elliott really brought it today, as always. Kavan, we should consider all possible scenarios that a disruptive event can negatively affect our supply chains. The new
abnormal. Love it. That's nice. A good point. And at the same time, and I've spoken to this a little bit in some of the posts that I've made, we want to consider what the potential disruptive scenarios are, but we also have to consider the likelihood that they'll occur, because you can't over-index on these things, because that could be unsustainable from a buffer inventory standpoint, right? Or an emergency shipping cost standpoint. So we still have to treat this as a risk management exercise, which is what Kevon is talking about, but also we have to be reasonable about it. And early in this seismic societal disruption, Scott, you and I talked about not over-indexing and swinging the pendulum too far the other direction. I can already see trends that is starting to happen. Smart companies and companies that are thoughtful, mindful of the balance between cost and effectiveness, they'll be okay. But there will be some companies that will harm themselves by over indexing on safety.
The grand reckoning for sure. And
Yeah.
so I stand corrected. So Sean is referring to the Boring Company, which is a Elon Musk venture. So I think this is maybe it's the one that I've seen in news articles about some of the ways we can alleviate typical traffic, which is through tunneling and some other things. And maybe
He
that's
wants
the same
to put
company.
trains underground effectively, right? Yep.
Let's see here. And then Peter follows up on Azalea's comment that the keyword diversification of your supply chain is a must. Excellent point. And on so many different planes and levels.
Mhm.
All right. So a hugely busy Monday here at Supply Chain Now, Greg. Wonderful guest and Elliott Paige. Really fascinating, given his perspective that so many rest of us don't see day in and day out. So loved having him. Enjoyed our buzz on some of his news stories. We'll keep our finger on the pulse there. But what's before we sign off here, what's one big key takeaway from all the comments and Elliott's perspective and some of the things that you shared? What's the one big thing?
Yeah, clearly there is a lot of attention on air cargo, air freight, air travel right now, and I think we need to keep our eyes open as well as on it, because things will continue to change. Fortunately, people like Elliott and Linda and their teams are very aware of, obviously, of the conditions now, the conditions that caused where we are now, and they have an eye to the future to solve that. And I think that is the key takeaway. We can't look past these coming disruptions to this new normal or abnormal, however you want to call it. We have to continue to be diligent and anticipate what some of those disruptions will be and develop solutions for them.
Well said. Well said. Well, hey, y'all check out if you like conversations like this, be sure to check us out at supplychainnow.com. Working hard to serve as a voice of global supply chain, and brand new website. It's a lot easier and
Prettier,
but a lot easier to search for past episodes, which I love that functionality. So y'all check that out. And hey, your feedback is welcome. How can we better serve you and put critical information at the tips of your fingertips? At your fingertips. At your fingertips.
Now you got me thinking about it. I don't know.
Well, hey, Greg, a pleasure to do it. Big thanks to both Elliott and Linda with the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Big thanks to everybody that showed up. Hey, big thanks to OpenText, the information company. You can learn more about OpenText at opentext.com. Stay tuned for upcoming appearances by Mark Morley. I think we put his episode in the comments. Greg, you're going to say something?
I can't wait to talk to Mark Morley. One thing I just want to let people know, I will be shaving this off. I wanted to have as much beard as I could while talking to the Viking Peter Stongelang from DB Shanker today, who's going to come out in a future Tequila Sunrise episode. But I'm looking at myself going, my gosh, either commit or cut it off. No,
I love it.
Yeah, of course. What we're doing with OpenText is really special, and I really appreciate what they are doing to connect supply chain, not just supply chain, but to connect data that is critical for supply chain. So that's why we wanted to partner with them.
Agreed. It fuels the entire global industry forward, that data, critical need. Okay, so everyone, hope y'all have a wonderful week. Thanks so much for joining us here. Be sure to check out Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcast from. And we will see y'all Thursday. Special guest on our Thursday live stream, the one and only Sandra McQuillan, Chief Supply Chain Officer at Mondelez International. Don't miss this live conversation. Bring your POV, bring your comments, your questions.
Bring a friend.
That's right. Sandra.
It's that important, folks.
It really is. And we're, as we've shared before, we're big fans of Sandra, but she really, truly represents that forward-looking, next generation global business leadership that is so vital across this global business world that we live in. So join us Thursday, 12 noon Eastern time for that conversation with Sandra McQuillan. On that note, hope y'all have a great, wonderful week. On behalf of our entire team here, big thanks to Natalie and Clay and Amanda behind the scenes making it happen. Big thanks to my colleague, Greg White. Scott Luton signing off for now. Hey, challenging you, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.